a very good use of the
no,
court.
That's a light note, Honorable Session. President Theuri, tell me, because I mean, there's all this confusion, and I heard the judges say that the fact that this CAS position existed, it's an interlink between the PS and the CAS, and saying that you have to have such a position created in a manner that is not lower than the position of a PS or even the position of a CS. When you look at what Wakili Sige is saying, that they are going to appeal against this decision to save the entire 50, from your view, because he said that if you asked a biased lawyer, I don't know they are biased, what do you think are the possible grounds of argument at the Court of Appeal?
I mean, I expect definitely the petition, the appellants, whoever they will be, to challenge first the question of constitutionality or unconstitutionality of the positions. I think that would be the main plank of the argument. You see, both the majority decision and the dissenting decision focused on the historical aspects that informed the proposal within the Constitution to limit the number of cabinet secretaries. So that is what is going to play out, I think, in my view, at the Court of Appeal.
Right.
And so therefore, my friend here, Sosion, should not really worry so much about the different interpretations as he seems to think they are, because quite rightly, the question of whether there are different interpretations is one which the High Court settled yesterday. Now, I think something that perhaps is lost, and Sosion may have the opportunity again to read the decision, is this, that the High Court found certain issues to be res judicata. Res judicata in the sense that res judicata is something that has already been determined by court, and so therefore the court ought not to hear that issue and determine it again. What was one of the issues that the court found to be res judicata? Is the question of the determination of the unconstitutionality of that office. So the court did not determine the question of unconstitutionality. It went by the Murima decision, which already found those positions to be unconstitutional. So whereas certain people are saying that there are three different decisions, the court has actually determined that point and said, no, we are not going to make a determination on the question of unconstitutionality. We are going by the Murima decision. When we went to court in the High Court, and even in the ELRC, the Murima decision is what you call a guiding decision. It's a decision which is given guidance on how the office ought to be established, which our friend here is calling the regularization of that office. One of the things which the court also said is the res judicata is the question of whether that office is of a stature of a state office that requires an enabling legislation so that it can be tabled in Parliament for adoption. Now, if you remember the advert that was put out by PSC, the intention was that after the competitive recruitment process, the names were to be submitted to Parliament for vetting. And that happened. And Parliament sent it back and said, there is no enabling legislation that would allow us to vet. For that reason, we cannot vet. And that is why they were hurriedly sworn in at 7 on 23rd, when a decision was being expected at 9, when the matter was being mentioned at 9 on the 23rd. But that is neither here nor there. So, and this is what should worry Sosion so much, that the decision that they sought to comply with, which is the Mrima decision as government, has not been fully complied with, because there's no national legislation establishing this office. Now, when I hear Mheshimiwa here, and who served as a former CAS, explaining about the function of office, explaining why it is so important to have that office, that is everything that we all know about this office. And that is one of the issues that was being challenged. That this office is so high up there that the CS goes to Parliament for vetting. The PS goes to Parliament for vetting. This person is in between the CS and the PS. And it's not going for vetting. And that is why Mrima said, you must establish that office through an act of Parliament so that they can go for vetting, because it's a high-profile position. And I think Honorable Elachi here has confirmed. So the question then becomes, was there substantial compliance with the decision in Mrima? There was none. Now, the final question, which the court also determined, was the question of public participation. Now, let me just give you what the Public Service Commission said, that it received about either 52 or 58% of the people who made representation before it said that that office is expensive to maintain. What did the PSC say? No. Despite the fact that more than 50% of the views that we've received from the public are saying that the office is expensive, we will nonetheless establish the office because there is a budget for it. No advice at that point from SRC, because the advice from SRC came this year.
And said?
So they had no advice from SRC whether they can be able to sustain that office. Remember,
what did that advice say?
The advice from SRC, what it did, it was actually not advice. What SRC did was to say, this office should be paid 1 million. You know, this is the grading structure and whatever. Okay. But in terms of seeking advice on the effect of that office, the establishment of that office on the National Compensation Bill, that was not done. What did Mrima say? Mrima said that before you establish an office in public service, you must consult SRC on the effect of that decision on the National Compensation Bill. So was there compliance on that aspect? There was none. So it brings us then to the question.
Okay.
If the High Court says that you are supposed to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and you haven't done it, and a subsequent court comes and says, having looked at the decision in this is what you were supposed to do, and you did not do, you ask yourself then, which is this other decision that they are saying is conflicting? So all the decisions are actually on point.
Okay.
Both the Mrima decision and the three-bench decision. But before I finalize, because it is also my duty to give information to the public with regards to what Mheshimiwa was saying, it's actually a wrong position in law with regards to the fact that the president can appoint advisors. And I want to point them out to the Public Service Regulation, Public Service Regulation, Regulation 27, which says that the Commission shall be responsible for the appointment of advisors to the President, Deputy President, and Cabinet Secretaries. So these are things that already have been done, because the President has been given his advisors, Deputy President has his advisors, and if they deem that they want to use this route then to go and perhaps bring in the CASs under the guise of advisors, then already there's the regulation in terms of how that is supposed to be done. And if it is done outside this regulation, then of course it's obvious what is going to happen next.
Okay, I hear you on the question of, because I remember reading that report by the Public Service Commission that 58% said that of Kenyans that made their submissions were saying that they didn't agree with the creation of the positions. But did the court talk about that? Because Justice Ongudi says that the public participation was sufficient. Did the court go into the nitty-gritties of what the percentages were? Because again, the views were not as much. They didn't even hit.
No, that was dealt with at the ELRC in terms of the response that was filed by the Public Service Commission to satisfy the court that there was a proper process of public participation. And
the court did not disagree or express themselves on the percentages?
The court did not express itself on the percentages.
Okay.
But what the High Court has done is to look at that report and say, if majority of the Kenyan people disagreed with the formation of an office, saying that it is expensive, how do you just say that because there is a budget, we can continue with this office? You ought to have consulted SRC on the question of, and that is why the High Court has said that the public participation that was conducted, essentially agreeing with the position that we took to the ELRC, that the information that has been given to the public was not sufficient to allow them to engage in meaningful public participation as is required under the Constitution.
Okay. I want us to listen